I'm a firm believer that nature is healing. In these chaotic times, I invite you to take a breath and reconnect with our natural world. Wow, right in front of us. I'm Chris Morgan. Join me on The Wild as we explore stories of hope and resilience in nature. We'll bring you up close to some extraordinary species and learn how they are finding ways to adapt and thrive in fast-changing environments. Listen to The Wild on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Meet Me Here, your weekly guide to arts and culture worth leaving your house for. I'm Jeannie Yandel. Barbara Earl Thomas is an acclaimed visual artist based here in Seattle. She was a student at the University of Washington in the early 1970s when she met a mentor who changed her life, the Black modernist painter Jacob Lawrence.
I always say to people about Jacob, they said, God, he tells all these sweeping stories. He talks about the Great Migration. He talks about, Hiroshima. He talks about all these things. I said, but the point is, if he were not an amazing painter, it would just be an illustrative sort of walkthrough. And the fact that he is able to have you enter the work through his amazing vision and the way he puts the colors together, the way his compositions, which are sublime, it's the thing that you strive for.
By the time Barbara Earl Thomas met Jacob Lawrence, he was already a famous artist. But Barbara didn't know that. She just knew that Jacob and his wife, the artist Gwendolyn Knight Lawrence, opened up their lives to her. The three of them became close friends. And when Jacob died in 2000, Barbara decided she was going to keep saying Jacob's name and talking about him and his work. Or, as Barbara says it, she was going to make sure Jacob's star stays high. This last fall, Jacob Lawrence's work had its first solo European exhibition in Amersfoort, outside Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Barbara made 4 portraits of Jacob that were part of the exhibition, and Barbara knew she needed to be there for the opening. She'd already been planning a trip to Europe to see her own work unveiled in Seattle's sister city of Nantes, France. She asked her friend, writer and arts community leader Leilani Lewis to come along for the trip.
I will say that I had never actually heard of any of the places that were on the itinerary at the time I agreed, and that made it all the more exciting.
Barbara is now sharing her mission with Leilani to keep expanding the artistic legacies of Jacob Lawrence and now his wife, Gwendolyn Knight Lawrence. Barbara and Leilani are so much fun to spend time with and listen to. So we invited them into the KUOW studios to interview each other. Leilani started things off with a question for Barbara.
Barbara, I know of you to have been educated here at the University of Washington, and much of your practice in art started with education by really incredible artists who were teaching here at the time, Jacob Lawrence being one of them. And I would love to know more about a phrase that you've used before about keeping Jacob's star rising. Why is that important to you?
When Jacob died in 2000, and I'm thinking about, the fact they had no children. And also I kept being asked. I can't tell you how many times I was interviewed. What was he teaching like? What was he like? What were the stories? And I thought, well, I'm going to tell that story. And then as I got older, I realized, I have a bevy of information and experience that I want to make sure doesn't get left on the side of the road without someone picking it up and carrying it forward. And so that's what I'm doing.
So Barbara, you have built actually quite a vast community around you. There's a lot of us. And I was just wondering why you've chosen me.
Well, and I don't know if if I actually make a conscious choice about who I choose. I just figure out what energy happens, because one has to think about one's own finality on the planet in order to think about what one may pass on. And I realize I really want to make sure that Jacob's star stays high. And I also feel like I pick people who I think are honest and who have a good sense of humor and who also have a way of having room to do what it takes to carry that forward. You know, when I remember when we first met, you know, I kept going, I said, I need you to come over here and I need you to sit down and look at these lectures I'm giving. And I want you to learn these lectures. You do not have to be an art historian in order to be, you know, sort of well-spoken about someone's history and subject. And you said, well, yeah, I can do that. And that's all I needed to hear. I'm not an art historian either. But it hasn't stopped me from going out and giving lectures and standing up and being on stage. So I think you could do it too. You photograph well.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to move now to talk about this epic and trip that we took, this incredible journey.
The trip was, number one, first based around the fact that Jacob Lawrence was going to have his first ever European debut in Amersfoort, Netherlands, and that was going to be at the end of September. I was going to be installing a sculptural piece that I'd made for a park in Nantes, France, to celebrate. And I thought, well, here you are. You're a writer. You can come and you can write about this. And I said, sometimes you can leave it to chance, or as I like to say, you can take your own weather with you. And the thing I think that's really, really very important, especially at the moment in history that we're living right now, the idea that we are actually in charge of our history and in charge of our personal experiences and how they're documented. And another reason I wanted you there was because I know and I knew you will write about this. And this, to me, was an affirmation of taking charge of our own narrative, shaped by our vision and our language. For me, that was part of the other part that was very important. That's why you were there. I'm not dumb.
More from artist Barbara Earl Thomas and writer Leilani Lewis in just a minute.
Everything is expensive in Seattle. But when it comes to restaurants, I got a lot of tricks and tips up my sleeve to help diners eat well in this city. I'm Ton Ben, host of Seattle Eats, a food podcast from the Seattle Times and KUOW, part of the NPR network. I'll share about the latest buzz in the Seattle food scene, like the hottest openings and the best bites that are worth your money. Listen now to Seattle Eats on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.
The first part of Barbara and Leilani's European adventure happened in Nantes, France, a sister city of Seattle. Barbara had created a large permanent piece for the city, a gate with 2 intricately cut and carved doors that was installed in a park there that's about the size of Central Park. Leilani tells Barbara what it was like to see her work unveiled in Nantes for the first time.
I'd actually seen the rendering, and I had seen some of the paper cuts that you did in your studio in Tyvek. But when I got to this park, and, you know, we were there for this unveiling, and then we sort of walked up on the gates. I actually wasn't prepared for, they're sort of grand. They're like 12 feet.
Yes.
They were just a lot more permanent looking. And then something about the intricacies and the flora and fauna and the figures. And I've always commented that it's your ability to see in negative space and cut to these beautiful designs, and then to see that rendered in metal for a permanent garden. It was just really stunning.
Being there together, and the sky was so incredibly cerulean blue, and my piece is made in Corten, so it was kind of a reddish brown. And all of a sudden, you know, of course, we've got French, we've got English, we've got things being said, and all of a sudden I felt there was a perfect translation, you know, that was with and without words. And so having us all there just owning the moment, that was my favorite time. For me, it's the theme of my life. How can I bring people together? How can I make community at the moment I'm in and be present for the moment I'm in? So to have loved ones be there, being part of this, I think was the final part of making the piece. It was a party.
It was a party. It was like, yeah, it was
a party. We brought the party to Nantes.
Yes, we did. We did. They will not soon forget us. So we're going to get into the last part of the trip, which was this time spent in Amersfoort in the Netherlands, about just, was it 30 minutes outside of Amsterdam, where we got to see Jacob Lawrence's work shown for the first time in Europe. And I wanted to know why you believe it was important to be there when it opened.
I think that something that was really important to me was, and it's just really simple, Jacob wasn't able to be there. He would be 109 years old were he alive. And I happened to be alive, and I thought, I want to show up and be there. So we were all there as witness and all there as representatives of and marking that moment. And that's why it was so important to me. And Jacob's work is particularly, I mean, it's always relevant. And you can always find a moment where it seems like this is just what we need to see right now. The people in Amersfoort came, they spent hours looking and reading and learning, and no one asked the question, why is this here? I mean, no one said, oh, why is this African-American modernist important to us? They just didn't ask that question. It was apparent, or it was not a question that came to their mind. And I felt like, we've arrived someplace in history and in time where those kind of intro questions are just not relevant because it's evident. I took that to heart, that I didn't have to first preface and then introduce and justify. I'm so happy to have lived long enough to experience that.
A woman came up to you, and I don't know that she recognized you as the artist with the pieces, the portraits of Jacob, and she remarked that it was really wonderful to see Jacob Lawrence's image through your eyes. And then she talked about her career, which is, I think she taught art history at high school or college level. And she said that she used Jacob's work to talk about American history and American culture. And one of the things that she remarked on was that George Floyd, during that time, she anchored it to some of Jacob's pieces that remarked on police brutality and were documentation, basically, as he was really a historian. And she had an emotional, she cried. She cried telling that story about teaching her classes and using Jacob's work as a vehicle to talk about really difficult subjects, really challenging concepts, and real honest assessments of a system in the United States.
Watching people have the experience through the work really speaks to the power of the creative process, really speaks to the power of the artist when they transcend something that's not just descriptive, but it touches the souls of others. And I think that there's something rigorously honest in his work. And when I'm making my work, I try to be as honest as I can in the work. And if you do that, and then it does end up touching people. And that experience is one which is why I am so fiercely inspired to make sure that I leave that kind of energy with others to carry on and point it out, because sometimes things do get buried. Watching people who are first introduced to the work, whether it's my work or Jacob's, and having there be this human response to say that we need to have the humanity of our existence touched on, not necessarily just whether we are American or we're European or we're some other kind of nationality. How do you feel about what you see as the connection between or among me, you, Jacob, and Gwendolyn Knight Lawrence and this moment that we're in right now? How does it make you feel when I say, I'm going to pass this along to you? What do you think it means?
How it feels to me is, one, first, a deep, deep honor, because I deeply care about Jacob and Gwen, not having known them, but knowing that how they've moved and operated in your life has brought me to care deeply for them. And I care deeply for you. So this is an incredible honor. And it also is a gate opening to possibilities, to do incredible things, to ensure this star keeps rising. Yours, Jacob's, Gwen's, and the story of who they are. And I get that through you. So that is really moving, honored, and also, what an exciting proposition.
What an exciting proposition. And, that's what I think my point is on the planet. But there are many people who love Jacob and Gwen, and there are many people who will talk about them, in years to come. But I want to make sure that the stories that I know about them are carried forward in the way that I've understood them. And this is my best chance at doing it. So I'm not going to leave it to chance. And you can't do anything really great alone, at least not these kinds of things. So it's a collaborative sport.
What advice do you have for me?
People ask me, what is in your life do you think is the thing that has brought you the most and the best success? And I will say this: I just kept showing up. I showed up when I felt like I wasn't visible. I showed up when I didn't win the thing. I showed up when I got the prize. I showed up when I didn't even know who the people were in the room. And I walked in and I put my hand out and I said, hello, my name is, and don't ever not be willing. Someone may look at your hand and not shake it, but don't be afraid to walk up and offer that introduction, because if they don't take it, it's on them. And you don't know what you're going to learn. And don't ever, ever think that it's not worth it if it's not perfect. I think that if anything has undone us, it's that idea that we can't act unless we know it's going to be perfect in the outcome. And I mean, obviously, if you're starting with human beings, it's not going to be anywhere near perfect. And share. Share. I mean, I always say there's enough spaces on the stage for us all. And know that you're making a way for something to happen in a time and space in which you may not exist. And so you don't know what the outcome is going to be of a decision you make, but do it anyway. That's my best advice.
I love it.
There you go.
It.
Yeah. And then, but while we're here, we party.
Yep.
We have some photos of writer Leilani Lewis, artist Barbara Earl Thomas, and Barbara's work at KUOW.org. Do yourself a favor and go check these photos out. Barbara's work looks incredibly delicate, almost like doilies or cut paper snowflakes from a distance. But she incorporates images, words, figures into her pieces. They're really gorgeous. Also, Seattle is getting its own permanent installation from Barbara at the Judkins Park Light Rail Station. That's set to open in the next month or so. And we've got a link to Leilani's excellent public display art piece about Barbara's work and her gate in Nantes in our show notes. Thanks for listening to Meet Me Here. Meet Me Here is produced by KUOW, a proud member of the NPR network. It's hosted by Katie Campbell, Dyer Oxley, and me. And it's produced by Kyle Norris, Brandy Fullwood, and Matt Martin. Phyllis Fletcher is our editor. You can find out more and support the show at KUOW.org/meet. And if you're enjoying Meet Me Here, let us know. Rate and review the show wherever you listen. It really helps. If you have an arts and culture event you want to tell us about, email us at arts@KUOW.org. That's arts@KUOW.org. I'm Jeannie Yandel. See you soon.
On the latest Sound Politics, Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson faces her first test in office, which she addressed but didn't answer at her first State of the City address.
And in Olympia and across the country, tax the rich efforts are taking shape. Here, the question is, can a millionaire's tax pay for everything the governor and Democrats want it to?
I'm going to guess no, but we'll talk about it on Sound Politics, wherever you get your podcasts.